Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by the one, the only G. Edward Griffin. First of all, thank you for joining us again, sir.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure, and I always appreciate getting on your show because you're like a machine gun with all kinds of really good questions that keep me awake.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And, you know, there's a lot of things that in another way is keeping people awake is what you're doing, especially with the Red Pill Expo coming up. Yes, another Red Pill Expo in 2019 in Mesquite, Nevada. So we're going to get into a lot of that, links below later on. But first, I want to get into some of the news because there is no shortage right now. It almost seems like we're getting inundated, overwhelmed with news, especially about the Federal Reserve lately. Of course, you wrote the book, Creature From Jekyll Island, and a lot of people want to hear your thoughts on this massive amount of quantitative easing, or as Jerome Powell has been calling it, not quantitative easing, quote unquote, regarding just pumping billions, tens of billions of dollars into the economy on a regular basis. They say it's just, you know, business as usual. It seems to be a massive desperation move, on the other hand, to try and prop up a completely fake economy with more fake money. What are your thoughts on the recent desperation by the Fed to kind of keep the U.S. economy afloat?
Well, I think the question contains the seed of its own answer. It seems like an act of desperation, and it is. We know that the Federal Reserve, which is technically in the jargon, it's called a central bank. All the major nations of the world, and most of the non-major ones too, have their little central banks, which simply means it's a cartel of local private banks who have been given the authority by the politicians in return for favors, of course, but been given the authority to create the nation's money supply. It's a horrible situation, and people don't understand it. They think all of these central banks, they think that the Federal Reserve, for example, is a government agency, and whatever it's doing, surely it's under the control of our government. It's under the control of our president, under the control of Congress. They watch it carefully, don't they? And of course, the truth is they don't. It's because it's the other way around. You know, there's the old saying that he who pays the piper calls the tune. And it was Lord Rothschild over a century ago that is quoted as saying that I don't care who makes the laws as long as I make the money. Now, and of course, the inference is that I'll buy, if I can make the money supply, I can buy up politicians who make the laws. So that's the way it really has turned out. And most Americans, for sure, have no idea that that is the reality under which we're living. And you mentioned the Red Pill Expo a moment ago. Those are the kinds of things that we talk there about, the difference between illusion and reality. And in all of the important things, the really important things in our life, like our monetary system, it's like, you know, our healthcare and all these things, our political system itself, we're living under conditions of great illusion. We are taught in school, our parents think it's true, they teach us things, and we teach our kids these things. And then when we get old enough to start questioning, if we still have any of that ability left in us, we start questioning authority, which is a big step for most of us. It was for me. We're taught to follow authority. So when you start questioning authority and you start asking questions, and then they turn around and slap you in the face, say, don't you dare ask that question again. But they don't answer you, or if they do answer, you don't like the answer. Anyway, so as you get older and you get into that phase, you realize that so much of our lives are in illusion. So this Federal Reserve thing is one of those great illusions. We think that the Federal Reserve is there to help us, to stabilize our monetary system, to keep the purchasing power of the dollar stable. And whatever ideal we may have for the Federal Reserve, if you have to give it a report card, since it was formed back in 1913, you had to give it a report card and grade it for how is it done. It would get failing grades all from top to bottom because it just has not stabilized our currency. Yeah. It has presided over Great Depression. The biggest depression we ever had came soon after the creation of the Federal Reserve, and that was no coincidence. And we've had depression since, ups and downs, booms and bust cycles. All of that is directly caused by the fact that our monetary system is in the hands of people who find it very profitable to plunder us, and they do it legally through this system. That's the reality.
Yeah, and the notion of the Federal Reserve stabilizing the economy, to me, kind of seems like firemen starting fires and then trying to put it out with kerosene out of those hoses. And, it's just absolutely crazy to me, because obviously the recession was just pushed off. I mean, it's still kind of happening. It's just been papered over with more paper. And it's gotten to this point where, look, we've gotten comments for years here at WHAM about how, oh, you've been talking about it for so long, when's it going to happen? And the truth is, in one way, it's already happening. You look at the homelessness, you look at the poverty worldwide, and you look at the instability worldwide. No matter where you go in the world, you see huge uprisings. But at the same time, I mean, it's not about when it's going to happen. It's a fact that it's basic economics. It's got to happen. And you see recently all these countries around the world, they're desperately bringing down interest rates for the most part. We see that the ECB is trying to push interest rates into negative territory. Mario Draghi's been on top of that, soon to be replaced by Christine Lagarde, because that's going to be a big change. And then you look at Australia and Britain and India, everywhere you look. And now in the United States, Trump, not that long ago, I think it was about a month ago, said that he wants to see lower interest rates at zero, if not negative, and as if that's a sign of a great economy. But if you go into negative territory as far as interest rates go, when you're already in a crisis, that is really, really bad for any central planner, really. So, Ed, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the notion of negative interest rates and just this craziness of like even banks paying you to get a mortgage. I mean, what do you think of this?
Well, it's on the face of it, of course, it's a mathematical absurdity. That's like saying a negative heartbeat. it's technically and even theoretically, it's impossible. But people accept it because everybody uses the phrase. So what is it? Well, especially, let's take it at its source when banks are offering negative interest to you as a depositor. That means you put in $100, and then if you change your mind, you want to take it out, you get $92 back. That's called a negative interest rate by the banks, but I call it theft. It's legalized theft because they can't do that unless they get their buddies in government to pass a law to say, oh yeah, you can do that. That's entirely legal. And that's what they do. And they usually make it sound like they're doing it for us, they're doing it to stabilize the economy and all of that illusion again. So a negative interest rate is nothing more than a legalized system in which the banks are allowed to take the money out of our deposit accounts and take it for their purposes because they're running out of money. They're spending money like a drunken sailor on a weekend, and even though they have the most profitable business in the world, they can charge interest on debt, but it's debt of not their money. They don't have the money. They create the money when they make the loan. That's what most people don't realize. They think the bank is loaning their money to you. Well, no, they're not. If you go in and you have let's say you want to borrow you borrow a couple of $1,000s for a big, magnificent TV set. You've got to have this one because it's got that, that best resolution of deep blacks.
It watches you as you watch TV.
It watches you, yeah. So you want to borrow a couple of $1,000s, and you think, well, the bank had that money in its account and it loaned you that money, and that's the reason you're paying interest on it. And that's not the way it works. The bank doesn't have that money. And when they make the loan to you, that's when the money comes into existence. That's created on the spot just for your loan, and you pay interest on literally nothing except your own TV set, and your own promise to pay. That's really what backs up the whole system is your future labor, your promise. They're going to get the money from you. It's not their money. It's you and your labor and your effort that backs up the whole system. And we don't realize that. We think that somebody is making a sacrifice and loaning us money that existed before, and aren't we grateful to get it? And so therefore we're willing to pay interest rates on somebody else's money. We don't realize it's really our money. It's like we created the money and said, look, I don't have any money, but I'm going to print this stuff up like monopoly money and put my name on it. It's the Griffin bill or something like that. And I'm going to say on this bill or on the backside, I'm going to back up this money by my car. I've got a nice brand new car out here in my driveway, and I'm going to back it up by my car. Or I'm going to back it up by my OU. I'm just going to say, I'm promised to pay you. It's an IOU. It's backed by me. It's either an asset or a promise to apply labor to it. And I can't circulate that bill around because, first of all, most people don't know who Griffin is and what the heck is a Griffin bill. Never heard of that before, and they will never accept it. And if they do know Griffin, they probably think, I don't know, that car doesn't look like it's in very good shape, and I don't want it anyway. And how would I get a car? I'm only borrowing $100, and the car is worth more than a lot of technical problems. So nobody would take that Griffin bill. But if I take the same contract to the Bank of America, or the Bank of Hades, or whatever it is, and they do the same thing, people say, oh, well, I'll take that because I know this bank, it has their name on it. The bank has been around for 352 years, and it's a good bank, so I'll accept it. Or it says the United States on it, and oh, it's a Federal Reserve note. Well, it's backed by the government, isn't it? No, not really. It's still backed by your car or your promise to pay, but it's got a name on it, like the United States. And we say, well, I'll take that. So the process is the same, and the only difference is that we have been conditioned to believe that because it has the name of a bank on it, or because it has the name of the United States Federal Reserve System, which is just another name for banks, we think, oh, well, this we will accept. And besides, the law says we have to, or we go to prison. So because of deals like that, we do accept that kind of money, but it's still basically the same as if you and I here had created our own money and tried to offer it into circulation. So it's a kind of, it seems absurd the first time you run into it. First time I ran into it, I thought, wait a minute, can't be this. This is the United States of America. This is the banking system. Well, we built an empire on this thing. It can't be a scam like this, but it is, and that's of course what my book is all about, and other things too. But so when we come back to this non-quantitative easing, or whatever it is they want to call it, it's simply a matter of creating money in the process in which I've just described and putting it into circulation. Now, as I just said, money doesn't come into existence, really, into circulation until somebody borrows it. Okay, that's an important thing to keep in mind, because the bank can say, all right, I've got these reserves. I just created them on piece of paper. I've got the ability, the legal authority to create $100 billion today, let's say. But I can't do it unless somebody borrows it. Oh, this is interesting. The bank cannot create money out of nothing unless somebody wants to borrow the money they create.
Yeah.
So that is why you and I, every day, we get 2 or 3 solicitations in the mail from some bank saying, wouldn't you like a new credit card? Or wouldn't you like a little credit? How about $500 advance? You get 2.5 years to pay it back before you get the interest and all that sort of thing. Because they go out of business unless we borrow money. Well, you and I and most businesses, little businesses, what we borrow is peanuts on the world stage. The banks are looking for bigger game than us. They're looking for giant corporations. They're looking for governments. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for loans that have a lot of zeros before you get to the decimal point, because that means a lot of interest payments to them. That's what they live on. If we don't borrow the money, they don't make the money, which is why they're always focused on expanding debt. All right, so who is borrowing this money in the so-called quantitative non-easing, or whatever you want to call it? Who is borrowing it? The unspoken answer is governments are borrowing it. Oh, which government? Uncle Sam is the guy borrowing it, and they're spending it like crazy on all kinds of projects, of wars and welfare and graft, and you can imagine, they're buying favors from the people to get their votes. They're making promises that are going to be paid by inflation. You're going to pay for the promises, by the way. Everybody should know that. And that's where the money is going. It's mostly going into debt. The governments are borrowing that money. And that's the hidden secret behind all of this. Nobody wants to say, well, the banks are creating money for the United States government. They don't say that. They call it quantitative easing. We're going to ease the economy. We're going to help the economy. They never talk about what that means. That means government debt is what it means. So that's my take on all of this, just more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, and you're seeing a lot of companies also get into financialization. I mean, every coffee shop I go to nowadays has their own credit card, and I mean, General Electric used to produce amazing, products, but at this point, they've been in a tailspin since the early 2000s as far as their shares go, because they haven't focused on creating great products. They've been focusing on financialization, credit cards, becoming a bank essentially, and we've seen them spiral out of control largely because of it. But it's very tantalizing, the notion of being able to buy up and sell debt, and it's something that a lot of companies have gotten themselves involved in. But you mentioned something very important there, Ed, which is that they're spending it on wars. Now we can remember ancient Rome, and one of the things that led to them going down was the deficit spending after spending vast amounts of money on not just their own palaces to themselves, but to wars, countless wars. And it led to the end of the Roman Empire. And I wanted to mention, because this is very reminiscent of something we've seen recently, kind of a different subject, but Trump has been calling out what he calls endless wars. Now, most of us have been talking about how terrible these endless wars have been for a long time, and a lot of people are very happy to hear about it. But at the same time, he just deployed a whole bunch of troops to Saudi Arabia to kind of aggress against Iran. So while they're pulled out of Syria, and that's great, and he's getting unjust criticism for that, having just come from the Syrian border in Turkey, I can honestly say, while, yeah, it sped up the process of Turkey going after the Kurds, they would have done it anyway. And trust me, the U.S. empire in the Middle East has never helped anyone any good and has only caused more problems. But with that said, yeah, it's great. He's pulling the troops out of Syria and out of Afghanistan and out of Iraq and all these places, but he's putting troops in Saudi Arabia to aggress against Iran. Now, Iran has been an issue for decades and decades, for most of the last century, as I'm sure you've read into many times before, going back to the coup in the 1950s, the hostage crisis. Iran has been in the target like a bullseye on its head by the United States military-industrial complex worldwide for decades. What do you think about the recent news regarding Iran apparently trying to aggress against the United States, like they would want to, shoot themselves in the foot, and that Iran is the new enemy, as if it's new, that Iran is the new enemy of the United States? What do you think of this constant warmongering involving Iran?
Well, okay. I'm glad you said it twice. What do you think about it? Because I don't pretend to really be an expert on the Middle East and all. I know it's like a can of worms. There are so many undercurrents, and there's the word coming up, conspiracies involved. That there are deals and hidden agendas, so many in the Middle East, and I'm only aware of a few of them. But the one thing that it's clear, and I think most people should be aware of, one of them at least, is the fact that Iran has never been a threat to the United States. And in fact, there was a time when I think Iran was a pretty good ally of the United States, and the people of Iran, prior to maybe the last decade or two, and the people of the United States were very friendly. We had no axes to grind on each other. And it wasn't until we became more or less subservient to the foreign policy of Israel. And now I want to state this, every time you talk or criticize the government or policies of Israel, people say, oh, you're an anti-Semite or something like that. And of course, it's absurd. That's an old trick they try and use to cover up the fact that you're not supposed to criticize this particular government. And but it seems like the United States has become unduly, what is the word, subservient to the foreign policy objectives of Israel for some reason. I think it's because of the amazing effectiveness of the Israel lobby in the United States. We send a lot of money. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in aid in various kinds to Israel. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just, it's a fact, and it's on the record. But what we don't realize, or most of us don't, is that much of that money, I don't know what percentage, but a huge amount of it comes back to the United States in the form of donations to congressmen and senators who have voted for that aid. And so it's become really an ugly and dangerous situation, I think, in which too many of the political representatives here in the United States, our congressmen and our senators, are quite dependent upon this largesse, this huge amount of money coming to them in the form of donations for their campaigns through the lobby. And of course, that money originally came from US taxpayers in the first place because it goes around and some of it comes back as kind of a, I would call it a payoff and a thank you very much to those politicians who have voted for these huge amounts of funding, either economic funding or military support or whatever it is. And I think this is a very dangerous and it's a very unhealthy, it's an unethical situation for the United States to be in. Now, I start with that observation because I think everybody should be able to see that. And I think that if we don't keep our eye on that ball, we will not understand the ball game. It seems like much of what we do, even though it's always presented in terms of going after the bad guy, okay? There's always some bad guy that we're going after in the world to put him out of business. And of course, the American people are, oh, that's good. I guess it's okay for us to send our boys over in a war. As long as we're going to get rid of a bad guy, it's okay. So, but we're very selective on the bad guys that we pick. I mean, there are a lot of bad guys out there, and a lot of them get invited to the White House, by the way. But we don't go after those bad guys. We go after the ones that seem to be standing in the way of the political objectives, the foreign policy objectives of Israel. So, okay, this is a reality. This is an unpleasant and painful reality. We don't even want to think about it. And we certainly don't want to stick our heads up because somebody says, oh, you're an anti-Semite, or you wouldn't be taking that position. Don't you know that, Israel has got to do this in order to defend itself and all these sort of things. And so nobody wants to talk about that part of it. But I start with that awareness. And as I'm going to repeat, I'm not really an expert on this. And so I'm not offering this as anything more except in answer to your question, what do you think? And I'm glad you started off that way because that's the first thing I think about is that I feel uneasy about believing that what we are doing really is in the best interest of the American people. I think, that's the word, I think it is not. So beyond that, I don't really know what more I can add.
Yeah.
Except that I don't think we have any business sending our young men over there and young women over there to bleed and die. To attack Iran.
There's absolutely no moral or logical justification for after the United States has put bases in almost every country in the world. It's killed millions of people. Stalin killed millions of people. Hitler killed millions of people. I'm not saying that the United States is Hitler. I'm saying that they've managed to colonize more of the world than Hitler, which is something that we should all sit back and think about for a moment and think of where we are in the history books as far as that goes, when millions have died under the whole guise of creating freedom around the world and stopping bad guys from coming to the United States. And, even though computers could shoot down missiles on takeoff on the other side of the world from the United States these days, somehow people need to be on the ground in Iraq and arming and funding rebel groups to turn into Al-Qaeda and Taliban, ISIS, etc. I mean, one thing I always go back to is that the United States helped prop up Hitler. Then the United States helped ally with the Soviets against Hitler. Then the United States armed and funded the Mujahideen, later Al-Qaeda, against the USSR, and it goes on and on and on. It just problem, reaction, solution, repeat, which I think is a really important point to make. But yeah, it's really important to talk about Israel because their own plan, their own playbook says from the Nile to the Euphrates. That was their original goal of the Greater Israel Project, and something that a lot of people don't tend to talk about because they're afraid to. And with that said, Ed, there's another thing that we're not allowed to, or not supposed to talk about anyway, and we'll get into what we're allowed to or what we're not allowed to talk about more later, but it's this idea of the climate change hysteria, which I wanted to get into because that's been all over the headlines lately with this Extinction Rebellion. What are your thoughts on Greta Thunberg? We've seen young blonde Scandinavian girls used as puppets in propaganda campaigns many times throughout history. Is this another example of using the so-called cute factor being utilized to brainwash the public with this climate hysteria craze that's happening right now?
Well, I think to anybody who's aware of what's going on in the world, and I mean, I'm talking about anybody, I don't care what your position is on man-made global warming, maybe you still believe that it's real, and a lot of people still do believe that. And I can't really blame them, because it's always in their face in the mainstream media. That's all it says is, well, everybody knows that man-made global warming is real. You know, the debate is over on that, and only tinfoil people, tinfoil people think that man-made global warming is not real. So it's understandable to me why so many of my friends, and they're smart people and they're good people, they actually believe it, and they think that I'm wrong. So it's not a question of intelligence or anything. It's really a question of, are we questioning authority, and do we really know that our source of information is correct, or is there a hidden motive? Is there propaganda involved for something we don't think about? And so that is how I look at this latest example. It's propaganda, and it's very well orchestrated. It's well done, but anybody on either side of this issue can see that this poor little girl has been taught what to say. She's been stood up and said, "Now say it again, Greta. Now, put a pause there, and get a worried look on your face. And then when you're all done, don't be so quick to relax and laugh, and that sort of thing." But anybody that really has their eyes open can see that this poor little girl has been trained. And does she believe it? Of course she does. Of course she does. And my heart goes out to this little girl and many, many others. I look back at my childhood, and the things that I was taught were real, that I find out later were not real at all. But I totally believed in them at the time, because the adults and the authorities told me this was it, And anyway, so it's propaganda, and I think anybody can see it. The only question is, how long are we going to endure this? What is the point at which people with common sense rise up and say, "Look, enough of this garbage. Let's not trust these sources of information anymore. Let's just, when they walk in, just turn around and leave the room," And I think that's got to happen.
Yeah, I think I saw a joke article recently online that said something along the lines, a headline said something along the lines of, we are 12 years away from the media switching the timeline of extinction again. And I mean, it's true, because we just hear about this all the time in the 1970s, 80s. Of course, Dr. Tim Ball is going to be speaking at the Red Pill Expo in Mesquite. And Dr. Tim Ball, a climatologist, someone who is incredibly intelligent, has done incredible work on this subject matter, debunking a lot of the nonsense, is really crucial to understanding this kind of stuff. You ask him a question, and he will talk for an hour, and it's extremely interesting, and he breaks it down, every single issue involving it. But I feel really bad. I have no animosity towards Greta Thunberg. I feel really bad for this girl who's autistic, and they're using an autistic child to push a propaganda viewpoint, to push governments to steal more people's money. Even though government's the biggest polluter in the world, we're expecting government to fix this problem that government has been a huge culprit behind of pollution. Pollution is a real issue, and there's a lot of problems all around the world, especially China, which Greta doesn't mention ever, but that's because she's on a script. And when you see her asked a question during an interview, she sounds like Obama off a teleprompter, because she doesn't know what to say because she's not on a script. I mean, that says all you need to know about how real this movement is. I went to acting school when I was younger, and I'm telling you, just from my own perspective, not very good acting, and you could see it, and most people can see it, and that's why you have these government-funded, media propped up nonsense revolutions happening throughout the United States and Canada and elsewhere, the Extinction Revolution or Rebellion, and you see people super gluing themselves to the top of airplanes before they take off, and people super gluing themselves to roads, and it's absurd, and you're just annoying everyone. Most people are just annoyed because they're trying to get to work to feed their family, and they have a bunch of people without jobs. I'm sorry, but that's often the case, laying in the middle of the road so they can't get to work. And it's only going to take one guy to get mad, and I'm not saying it's justified, because it isn't, but it only takes one guy who's mad to run over one of these people to make this problem all the more worse, and then use it again in the media to say, see, these people are so persecuted, even though it's all the media talks about. But I mean, with this said, Ed, I think this is important to go into, because there's so many examples of things we're so supposed to not be allowed to talk about. These days, we've gotten to a point where you say certain things and there's what they call the cancel cult, or these people that just ask for shows to be canceled if a person who's maybe on the show says that maybe they like Trump, or maybe they don't believe in vaccines or something like that. And I wanted to ask, over time, people are allowed to say less and less. One cannot talk about vaccines or call out climate change hysteria on YouTube anymore without possibly seeing their careers destroyed. But why are people accepting the censorship? It's clear people are becoming more and more dependent, but are people also becoming more and more cowardly? I mean, the majority seem to be against censorship, yet most sit and do nothing as their speech becomes more and more muzzled. What do you think?
I love that question. What do you think? That because that gives me my out. Because I like to always say on questions like this, I'm not sure, but I do have some thoughts on it. And this question really needs a sociologist and a psychologist team of people to answer it, because you're dealing with human motivations and belief systems and all that kind of thing. But what I think is that people are not more cowardly. They just don't have leaders. I think that all of us, since we're Homo sapiens, have an instinct to travel in herds, in groups. We need leaders before we act. Very few people have great courage on their own as single individuals moving against great odds, but as part of a team, as part of an army, as part of a platoon, or something like that, where we have a leader. The sergeant is the leader, or the lieutenant is the leader, and we've been trained, and we feel the strength of our comrades with us and all that. We have great courage, some of us. Often wonder about myself if I've ever would have that kind of courage in battle, but I would try. I would certainly try, because I don't want to let my teammates down, my compatriots, my fellow soldiers. But one-on-one, it's a little different story. And I think it's one of the reasons that our enemies have been, from the beginning, very determined to eliminate our leaders and replace them with their leaders or false leaders. This is something I hope somebody will do a book on, or a documentary on the power of false leadership. The leader that's really working for the other side, who's been sent into your midst to pretend like he is your hero, so that you will follow him, and he will do many good things in order to prove that he really is a good guy. But his mission is to cave in at the last minute. So regardless of how good a fight is put up and how many good things he says, and even how many good things he actually does, none of them are really lasting. They always fall apart, or they're defeated at the last minute. Something happens. Oh my goodness! Well, we put up a good fight, but we lost. That's what I think is going on, and it's been going on that way throughout history. And so, what do I think about these things is that the American people are in need of a leader, and they're being denied leadership. That's one of the reasons for closing down the social media, because that would be kind of the last hope for a national or regional leader to rise up and be even recognized. If the media refuses to let the population know that there is such a person or group of people, and if they don't know that they exist, then they might as well not exist. And therefore, without leaders, the average person thinks he's lost already. He thinks he's alone. He doesn't have the courage because he thinks he's alone. And that's what I think is the real problem. If for some reason we could let the people of America and of the world know that there are groups, organizations, movements, and leaders, potential leaders, there would be a complete change. I think there would be a rise that would be so powerful that it would be amazing to see how quickly the world could return to sanity again. But we're at that critical point where I'm afraid that our opponents our collectivist opponents who want to enslave us have denied us the knowledge or the possibility of having leaders. And that's what I think is the answer.
You know, there's been a lot of evidence over the years that independent medias, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about all these different independent medias that have risen up over the years to replace mainstream medias very successfully, have been able to stop wars. For example, in Syria, the bombing of Syria, everyone knew it was a false flag. But with Iraq, for example, these independent medias weren't really around, so people didn't have that alternative perspective, and it stopped a lot of people from being able to make the right decisions. A lot of people were just angry and blindly supported war in Iraq, and I don't think that that would have been popular enough to have taken place today necessarily. But with that said, I think a lot of the establishment has recognized that. They're shutting down independent medias left and right. Tens of thousands of channels have been deleted from YouTube in the last few months, and they've cut down, for example, my viewership 80% since January. Cut my monetary abilities to sustain myself back 90%. Now that's 80% and 90%. That's obviously really large. It's very effective. But with that said, it's obviously my responsibility to do something about it, to find a different avenue to ensure that that message gets out to people. And I always look to the viewers as well to help out any way they can. But with that said, this is going to bring me into the Red Pill Expo here, because we aren't supposed to be allowed to talk about a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are off limits to talk about. People are afraid. And again, they use fear as a motive. It's a form of terrorism, really. They use it. They push their ideology by spreading fear. If anyone debates such an ideology, then they are this. They're a bigot. They're a racist. They are a denier. They're, all these different connotations that come into it. And with something like the Red Pill Expo, this is what I find so interesting about it, is that you have all these extremely controversial but really logical views and ideas that all come together under one roof, from the financial system to health, from vaccines to climate change, from war to homeschooling and that kind of stuff. I mean, all these things come together, and it's so important. So can you explain a bit about this second Red Pill Expo of 2019 in Mesquite, Nevada, which is convenient for me? It's only an hour drive away from me. And why you decided to have a second Red Pill Expo in 2019, and what the event means to you.
Well, that's a good topic. Now, that one I don't have to say, this is what I think. This is what I know. And first of all, just to clarify it for any viewers, this is really the fourth Red Pill Expo, but it's the second one in this year. So yes, we've had 4 of them now coming up, and they've been very encouraging. The response has been so strong that we decided, why do we wait a whole year to do another one? I mean, the battle is raging, folks, and we've got things to do, ideas to communicate, information to deliver. We can't just every 12 months decide, okay, we're going to spend 2 days and really get serious about it. We had to do more than that, which is the reason we created the Red Pill University, which we won't talk about now, but it's an extension of the Red Pill Expo, only it's 365 days a year. But it's in cyberspace, it's on the internet primarily, and we're trying to build units locally in every community as well. But back to the Expo, this is a big event, and this is an event that people come to from all over the world, literally. We always have a pretty good international representation there. And so we decided, well, let's see if they can have a Starbucks, 2 of them in a block in every city, and do well. Why can't we have 2 Red Pill Expos in the United States? So that was the thinking behind it, and I think it was good thinking. And so far, the response, the reservations are coming in right now, as a matter of fact, to attend this event, either by coming in person or watching it online, which would be live stream. So I think it was a good decision. And as you said before, it's an amazing collection of presenters. These are people, most of whom are really highly qualified individuals in their own professions. They have accomplished great things. They're strong people with good backgrounds. They've got a resume that in most cases, that you wouldn't believe. They're the kind of people you should listen to. But in every case, they've taken a red pill. and they have discovered something about, in most cases, their own professions or their own sphere of experience. They've discovered something that turned out to be an illusion, a major illusion. And like most of us, when you find out you've been fooled most of your life, you get kind of ticked off by it. And you think, this is, I got to do something about this. Or at least some of us have that feeling. We have to do something about this. So that's where these people come from. They are red pill takers themselves. They've discovered major frauds in some aspect of their lives, and they want to tell people about it. It's as simple as that. So yes, there are a lot of truth seekers out there. I mentioned a moment ago that we've been conditioned to think that we're alone, that we're the leftovers, that we're the horribly small minority of people that even question these things. And so who are we to say, we're outnumbered, so let's just shut up and be quiet? Well, that's not true. That's another one of the illusions, by the way. It's a major illusion. The reality is by far the great majority of the American people in particular, still have enough momentum from their culture and their knowledge base from where they came from. It takes a long time for that to die off. Now, if they can just get the new kids coming up through the schools and wash away all the history books so they know nothing about what happened prior to yesterday, and teach them all the propaganda and the slogans and the catchphrases and all that kind of thing, and wipe their brains clean except for what you put on there, then gradually they can take over and change a culture, which they're in the process of doing. But I'm here to tell you that in my observation is that there's a great deal of momentum, a huge amount of momentum. It's the major force that's still active in America, is that momentum from our traditions and our culture of the past. And the theater that we're getting on television is that the whole nation has gone crazy. That's not true. It's theater. These riots, these demonstrations, they look huge on camera. But what they don't show you, they should pan over to the side streets and show all the lineup of buses where they bust people in from all over the country, professionals in many cases, to put on these demonstrations and riots. This is a staged event, ladies and gentlemen. And don't think for a minute that you're alone and those people are the dominant force. Yes, we have those people in high places. We have those people in the media. We have those people in government. And it seems like the world has been converted to that kind of thinking. This is not true. So our job is to bring people together from that solid base, that momentum base of the real solid traditions of liberty and freedom and human dignity, and let them realize that it's time to get together, time to do something about it. And we're running out of time, but there still is time to do it. Basically, that's what the Red Pill Expos and the Red Pill University is all about.
Yeah, to your point, I remember putting together a lot of large-scale events on the streets when I was younger. 1,000 people would show up, and the media would show 5 people on the nightly news. But then some communist event would happen, and there'd be 15 kids running around the streets shouting at people with black masks on. And on TV, it would look like thousands of people. And they would, in some cases, just take footage from other events, including my own in one case, and use that as an example of how big the event was. So, I mean, it's all theater, as you mentioned. So much of what we see today is theater, and it's incredibly refreshing to see these events like the Red Pill Expo, which I've been to every single Red Pill Expo so far. It's been incredibly enjoyable going there. It's enlightening. You meet all these amazing people from all walks of life, not just the big names, but the people on the ground that you get to talk to at the event and have a conversation with and make friends with and, do work together with. And, you leave the event and it turns into something else. And all the education, there's entertainment, there's everything you could imagine at this event when it comes to trying to stimulate your mind and trying to find answers to the problems that so many of us see, but so many of us don't understand how we can actually nip in the bud. And I think it's important that we have these kinds of events as often as possible. So to see it go from last June in Hartford, Connecticut, and now see Mesquite, Nevada, a lot of people will say Mesquite, Hartford. Well, it's great because we're tapping into these different populations throughout the United States and basically getting to people's doorsteps and saying you aren't alone. And I think that's really important to watch take place all over this country. And I really hope everyone checks out the Red Pill Expo in Mesquite, Nevada. It's linked below. I want you guys to come and say hello to me, say hi to Ed, say hi to Eamon Bundy. Eamon Bundy is a speaker at the event, Dr. Tim Ball. I saw a whole bunch of people. I'm going to just show it on the screen here for you guys to get a picture of how many people are speaking at this event, and really big names, incredible professionals in their own right. And anyway, I really appreciate you going into all this with us, Ed. There's so much to talk about, and I feel like it's important that we wrap up all this information in a way that, we have solutions and we're not just sitting there in our chairs scared about the future and thinking about how terrible things must be. I don't think it's as terrible as all that. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism in the world around us. And I think that what you're doing is in many ways allowing people to have answers to these questions and be able to feel better about the state of the world for their kids or grandkids and going into the future. That's incredibly important. So as we finish this off, where can people go to find more information on this and help you in the work that you do, and obviously buy tickets to the Red Pill Expo?
Well, thanks, Josh. That's the thing. Yeah, we have to, there comes a point where we say, okay, we got it. We got the message. We realize there's a job to be done and we know what it is. So now how do we get organized, and when do we start, and what do we do? And so if that's your mindset, or if you think it could be your mindset, if it's welling up in you, I like to call it, when that happened to me when I was a young man, I said I discovered my crusader gene. I didn't know I had one. But the minute I began to realize that there was some serious stuff going on out there in the world that was affecting the future of my kids and my grandkids, and then I got the bigger view of what about the whole nation and the community? What about the world? I didn't know I cared about the world until I grew up a little bit and I saw how serious this was. If this fits you, and it doesn't fit everybody, I know that. Most people are content to just have a little information and say, my, isn't this serious? And I wonder what's going to happen next. And they're just sort of riding the boat. But if you're a puller of the oars and you want to determine where the boat goes, and that's, I think, probably represents about 15% of the population, then this is the place for you. And you're going to be amazed when you get there how many others are like it. And you'll make friends, and like immediately you'll run into somebody you've never seen before. Might look a little strange to you, and he's looking at you thinking you look strange to him. But the minute you start talking, you realize you're brothers. You should have known each other all of your life, because you come from that same mindset. So that's what goes on there. And so it's not just to go and listen to speakers and get more information, and that's important, but it's to meet other people and to form into a coalition. We've got to work together. We've got to figure out solutions. We have a little slogan we like very much. And it goes like this. It says, why fight City Hall when you can be City Hall? Nobody ever thought about being City Hall, coming into politics, or finding a candidate, not just see who's running and which one you're going to support. Let's go out and find your own candidate. Let's create your own team. Let's make sure they really are what they say they are, not just some political mentality that comes in and says, let's have a poll and see what people are concerned about. Oh, and now we know what people are worried about. So I'll go out and start giving speeches about I'm worried about those things too. You vote for me because I'm saying the good things. We don't need people like that anymore. That's the way it's been done. We have to go out and find our neighbors, our own friends, our members of our family, maybe even ourselves. We have to get into politics. We have to start replacing these collectivists that are in position there. See, these are the things we will really be talking about. So if you're interested, if your crusader gene is rattling, like a lot of ours, it rattles a lot, this is the place for you. So look us up. It's redpillexpo.org. Hard to remember? Yeah, not hard to remember. redpillexpo.org.
Well, I hope everyone puts it on their calendar. I'm certainly going to be there. And as per usual, I really appreciate your work. And again, this is about more of an evolution than a revolution at the end of the day. It's how we evolve to be able to naturally reject the problems of society today, and the problems of the collective, and the problems of the state, and the problems of the banking system, and all these problems. There's no shortage of problems, but I believe that there's more solutions than there are problems, and it just takes getting together and talking about them and being able to apply our own solutions rather than expecting the same people, the same entities that created the problems in the first place to magically solve them for us. That's been going on since ancient Greece, and I don't expect it to ever work. It hasn't before. It's not going to in the future. It comes down to you as individuals and getting together and focusing on the proper solutions for yourself and for your family and for your friends and for the future of the world, as you mentioned. So again, I really appreciate you joining us, and we hope to talk with you again soon.
Very good, Josh. Thank you, and keep up the great work, and then we'll see you in Mesquite.
Like what you see here at WHAM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely, extremely appreciated as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes. $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we can defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a patron. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale, so make sure to find us on float.app. That's flote.app. At Josh Sigurdson, as well as at WHAM, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on BitChute at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are 2 major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WHAM, that's W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.